As the second-hand car market continues to go down, there are some great deals to be had on some sports cars right now. So today I'm going to talk about 5 in particular that you can get for under £15,000. Do hit like if you like this kind of content, subscribe as well. And without further ado, let's get straight into it. The Honda S2000 is absolutely a future classic, with already a growing cult following and a lot of appreciation from JDM fanatics. It came in 2 generations, the AP1 and AP2, with the latter ironing out some of the teething issues of the first, while also effectively being a bit of a facelift. The AP1 dropped all the way back in 1999 now, with the AP2 arriving in 2004, and honestly, within our price range, there's no reason not to buy an AP2, given they start at around £8,000, with £15,000 getting you a 2008 AP2 model with 75k on the clock, which is pretty near the end of the S2000's production. That's actually some pretty big appreciation already, given only a few years ago you could get these at around the 5k mark, and I don't see those prices dropping again for nice examples anytime soon, especially when you consider the popularity of other inspiring Hondas. For example, the Integra and Civic Type Rs, the NSX, and cars like that. It was originally built to celebrate Honda's 50th anniversary as a car company and is reminiscent of other Honda Roadsters. I always find it so interesting how young Honda actually is as a car manufacturer given their success today. Speaking of success, the S2000 was a pretty successful Honda, so I always find it a bit strange that Honda never replaced it after it ended production in 2009. It came with a 2-litre inline-4 engine with VTEC, which makes 240 brake horsepower, taking it from 0 to 60 in 6 seconds, not actually too shabby for a roadster of its age, and much quicker than the MX-5 for example. The best thing about that engine though is that it comes alive at over 7,000 RPM and revs up to 9,000 RPM, meaning to have the most fun in one of these, you've got to be screaming it around, so it helps that it sounds pretty nice too. I've actually been in one, and while I did think it handled nicely, it was a bit more wallowy than the MX-5, though it's not a completely fair comparison given my MX-5 is track built, but even when it wasn't, it did still feel more dynamic than the S2000, albeit slower of course. That block is known to burn a lot of oil though, given the car revs so high, and the transmission is supposed to be pretty solid, which can't be said for the chassis, which is known to have issues with rust. I know I'm becoming an old man because I'm starting to like Porsche 911s more and more, including the super basic 911 996 Carrera 2. This arrived in the late 1990s to early 2000s with a typical Porsche facelift mid-generation, but it wasn't a typical 911. A lot of changes were made that upset a bunch of Porsche purists and delighted others. After the facelift, it came with a slightly larger 3.6 litre flat-6 engine, which puts up 320 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 4.8 seconds, which genuinely isn't bad at all for the absolute base spec 911. The pre-facelift came with a 3.4 litre block instead, but before I get into it properly, I have to warn you about both, as IMS failure is a leading problem to be aware of, which will require a full engine rebuild if it goes wrong, and on forums I've seen this costing people around 10k. Before buying, I would take a look at Porsche Club GB's helpful guide on the 996 generation more broadly to see some of the other pitfalls too, like RMS failure and the likes. I don't think the Carreras will be as sought after as cars like the Turbo or C4S, but given every generation before the 996 has now definitely achieved classic status, I think the 996 is next in line to become a cherished classic. And with the slim body, simple stylings, controversial headlights and water cooling, and the quite period interior matched with typical Porsche handling and dynamics, there's no reason in my head why that won't happen in the near future. So it does surprise me that you can get these so cheap. I found 0.1 examples starting at around the £10,500 mark, or £15,000 will absolutely get you a 0.2 from 2003 with 100,000 miles on it. And on release, regardless of any of the controversial changes, this car sold really well, continuing to boost Porsche's sudden resurgence that had come in the 90s thanks to cars like the Cayenne and Boxster. I would say this was probably the first properly mass-bought 911, given it sold almost 180,000 units in just 7 years, versus the 993 which sold just over 65,000, and though fewer sold than the G series, that car ran for more than double the time and only sold 20,000 more models. For me, this turned the 911 into a truly popular car as opposed to just a car for Porsche enthusiasts, which in turn has made so many Porsche enthusiasts today. If you know the channel well, you know I've been a big fan of the BMW Z4M for a very long time, and I nearly even bought one a few years ago, as the coupe in particular is a genuinely stunning car, which I reckon is a bit of a future classic as well. We already know the Z3M coupe, often fondly referred to as the clown shoe, has appreciated nicely great in price and is pretty sought after today, and though the Z4M coupe shape isn't quite as iconic, it's still a lovely looking car. That said, like the Z3M, it does still also come in convertible too for those who prefer it that way. I just love the muscular looks of the Z4M. It has the same 3.2 litre inline-six engine as the E46 M3, which makes 338 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 4.8 seconds, which actually makes it ever so slightly quicker than the M3. I would say this car wasn't really well known as a potential future classic until around 2016 to 2018, when prices started to steadily increase. I still remember these starting at around the 10k mark, and in the last couple of years, prices have stagnated a little bit, with coupes being available still within our price range. £13,000 is around the minimum you'll find a convertible for, and 15k will get you a 2006 coupe with 70,000 miles on it. In terms of modern BMWs, this is definitely among the best looking, especially if you smash on a set of CSL alloys, real or otherwise. It's definitely a bit of a Marmite car, as some people tell me they love them and others hate them. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. It comes with both a manual and automatic, with the latter actually being surprisingly good according to owners on forums, so don't be a manual snob like I am, and instead definitely consider whether the SMG might be right for you. If anything does actually let this car down, it's the interior, which is pretty boring. You can get some nicer specs, but net it kinda looks like an old BMW in there, because that's effectively what this is. The main catastrophic issues to be aware of are head gasket failure and Vanos issues. The suspension is also known to knock, and the SMG can also suffer as well, while rust can appear from blockages on the roof drain holes. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you are, then do hit the like button and subscribe as well if you're new. And just a message from me, I hope you had a lovely Christmas. Let me know in the comments down below what your best Christmas present was, if you were celebrating Christmas and got any presents. Mine's a bit of a secret, but you'll hear more about it in future. The Maserati 4200 might still be the cheapest car you can buy today with a Ferrari engine in it, alongside the Quattroporte. Genuinely, these will run you around £10,000 at the bottom end these days, and £15,000 will get you a 2004 model with around 60,000 miles on the clock, and yet they come equipped with a 4.2 litre V8 block that produces 390 brake horsepower, the most on this list, taking them to 60 in 4.8 seconds. And that's all for a car that has the same engine as the F430, California, and 458 to name a few, just obviously in a slightly different setup. Giorgetto Giugiaro penned the car too, so it has an incredibly famous designer credited with some of the world's most stunning classic and contemporary cars, and to be honest, this car is very much reaching classic sports car status at this point, especially because owning and driving one will require you to treat it with a lot of love and respect. It's not known to have any super common mechanical issues except for the automatic gearbox being problematic, but it is known to have bad build quality in line with a lot of Maseratis of its time, and when problems do arise, repairs can cost a fair bit, in line with having a Ferrari engine attached. Apparently newer examples were typically better built, but either way, to my original point, I wouldn't expect perfection out of one of these. Though it is a sports car, its primary purpose was actually grand touring, and I know an owner who takes on an annual trip around Europe with some other Maserati appreciators, and though plenty do end up having some kind of trouble, often electrical, the majority do make it back in one piece. The car had a facelift in 2005 which uprated the styling ever so slightly, with a more aggressive set of bumpers front and rear, larger intakes, new rims, and some nods to older Maseratis added into the mix, which is a nice touch. Plus the interior's got a slightly different trim. That interior is a lovely place to be, minus the build quality, especially in the right spec, though they are looking a bit dated nowadays. The main positive of this car though is the sound. That engine note is sublime on these, and Maserati really do a good job of enhancing it. One of the quickest cars you can get for under £15,000, which is also arguably the best sounding car on the list, is this, the Audi TT RS, which comes with a 2.5 litre turbocharged inline-5 engine, producing 335 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 4.2 seconds. Pretty amazing, though it's worth noting that it can feel relatively heavy to drive around, having been in one. It's less sports car dynamics and almost more Grand Tourer dynamics, though this can be changed with a few modifications like a Haldex controller to have more consistent all-wheel drive, some ARBs, and a nice suspension setup as well. It's a real shame that the TT as a car has reached the end of its life, particularly when you consider that inline-5 engine that's been shared through both generation TT RSs. Audi are one of the best when it comes to inline-5 engines, and the history behind them as well, being chucked into the Group B Quattro of the 1980s, makes them all the more desirable in my books, and you'll only really find them in the TT RS and RS3. And that's not just me who likes them. That inline-5 block won Engine of the Year awards 7 years in a row, which is absolutely absurd. This for me is like a baby R8, given it's so much faster than every other TT available, and genuinely not far off the first gen R8 in pace, especially the TT RS Plus versus the V8 R8. You won't get a Plus within our price range, but if you can stretch to one, you'll get a bit more power and some subtle aesthetic changes that only the most keen-eyed will spot the actual difference. And regardless, with all that power and torque, Audi had to use a bunch of strengthened parts on these and give it some larger brakes with 4-piston calipers to get it stopped. The interior is also very minimalist and a nice place to be. I'm genuinely a proper fan of how these look inside, especially if you get on with these sport seats instead of the comfort ones. The main problems to look out for are steering racks, window regulators and perishing seat leather, so most things are build quality related. So that is it. That is 5 sports cars you can get for under £15,000. You want to see some more sports cars, then click up here and subscribe as well down here. Huge thanks to patrons for their support, and to you guys all for watching. I will see you in the next one.